Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to Finding Freedom from Addiction podcast. I'm your host, Ken Metcalf, and today we are blessed to have with us Gina Barker. You got to meet on the last episode her husband, Paul Barker. Gina has so graciously agreed to be with us today. I'm going to ask some tough questions and dig deep into where Gina came from and exactly how she found freedom. What was the part of her life that she was able to get past to be able to find that freedom. That's my goal for today. Everybody welcome Gina. Gina, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. Glad you agreed to this. For everybody out there, you and I know each other quite well.
Yes.
We've dug deep into your life. Gina's been mad at me many times. As I taught classes, and Gina went to the rehab where I taught at. I was a leader, I guess we'll call it. That's lack of a better word in that situation. And part of my style is to push you to the place where you face you. I know that for me, as we talked about last time, I didn't find freedom until I was forced to face who I was. So, Gina, thanks. And I was going to have you tell me a little about yourself, but I think I want to dig, as I was watching, as you guys were watching with me, I was watching the intro and it had that picture of Gina. And my wife had actually found that picture on Facebook. It really makes me laugh about addiction. That's when we were looking like we were looking, but we thought we were looking good. Tell me, if you can, a little about that moment where that picture was taken.
That was in the bathroom of a house that I lived in, that I had gotten while I was sober. I had gotten many things when I got sober. But unfortunate events happened, and I relapsed, and I was a shell of a human. There was nothing inside of me. I felt like I was just so lost, and I wanted to die.
Well, you could, knowing you and seeing that picture, you could see it in your eyes. There was nobody home there.
No.
And that's not the only occasion there was nobody home throughout your life. Your story started young.
Yes.
As with a lot of us that went through addiction, our addiction began at a young age. Maybe we could start there with what exactly in your childhood started, whatever point you're most comfortable with, but how did you and what did you and why did you end up going down this path?
So my mother and father got divorced when I was 8 months old. My mother is manic depressive bipolar, and she's like what I like to call special. I basically raised myself. We lived in low income based housing, where drugs ran rapid. I seen a lot of things as a child that wasn't hidden from me, and so as I got older, I became curious and wanted to know more about this lifestyle and money and cars and how you get these things. And then of course they were selling dope, and so it was very intriguing to me. But like I said, I raised myself basically. My mom, she did the best she could with what she had and who she was. My mom had a caretaker that would come and take us to the store and pay my mom's bills. When I was about 3 years old, I was molested at a party that my mom had. Even though she was never an addict, she drank some and partied a little. After that, therapists say that came first, because the next thing I remember of my childhood was going and locking a chain lock. My mom had went outside to tell my sister goodbye. She was 8 months pregnant, and I locked the chain lock, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember dragging the chair in the kitchen and getting on the counter and getting on the refrigerator and taking almost a whole bottle of her nerve medicine, and it almost killed me. I was in a coma for 3 days. When I woke up, my sister had her baby. It was very scary. And at that time, I didn't understand why I done it, and I still don't know why I done it. I just got the urge and wanted to do it. I guess my mom take pills, and I wanted to take them too. I don't know. It's hard to explain. But therapists seem to think that I was abused and first, and then wanted to kill myself. So my first overdose was at 3 years old, which was a reality that I had realized probably about 3 or 4 years ago, when I was trying to get back to being sober and trying to get my life back.
So, you've obviously spent some time in therapy where they led you down the path of your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And so you started out unknowingly taking drugs. I mean,
Yeah.
you obviously went through the process yourself. You physically did it, but the reasoning there is not known at this moment, other than, and I don't know if you could even have comprehended at 3 that I wanted to kill myself. But so from there, I mean, coming back from that, well, it makes me, since your mom had a caretaker and obviously you went to the hospital, now you're home, still just you and your mom at this point?
My sister lived with us. She was 16 years older than me. She lived with us for a little bit when I was probably on and off up until I was about 7.
And then at that age, you're still living in the same neighborhood, the same projects.
Yes.
Same influences around you.
Yes.
And you had mentioned, wanting to see about that lifestyle. Is that the age, or were you a bit older, more pre-adolescent?
Yes. I would say when I was probably around 10, 11, maybe even 9. 9 was the first time I ever smoked a cigarette, and drank a beer Like when I was younger, when I was like 2 and 3, and my mom and sisters was having parties, of course, if you set a beer down, I would pick it up and drink it. But on my own, knowingly, you know, um, I just wanted better for myself. I didn't want to live my life on food stamps and in the projects, and not that that lifestyle isn't okay for some people, but I just wanted more out of life than that.
And so here you are, you're going to school. I'm assuming that because you go to school and you live in a certain area, that means you go to a certain school. There had to be more kids from your neighborhood, from the projects there, and then some kids that were not. And so you had a desire to be more like other kids. Did you want you to change? Or was it just your status in life? You just said this is not where I'm gonna be.
Oh, I definitely wanted to have nicer things. You know, I shopped at Walmart and the dollar store. You know, I wanted to go and shop at the mall and have nice shoes, Nikes to wear. You know, but that just wasn't. My mother couldn't afford that at the time. You know,
Right.
And I see that now. And honestly, I was a spoiled brat. I got what I wanted most of the time. Like, if I wanted something, I would throw a fit until I got it.
Well, that hasn't necessarily changed. Sorry, just a little humor where we know each other. It makes me question at this point now. So now you've drank some, and what were your thoughts about how do I do this? How do I get out of here? Did you decide, hey, I'm going to be a scholar and I'm just going to study hard and go to college? Or did you see other opportunities that were more readily available to you in front of you and follow those paths?
I knew I wanted to do something different in life. I just wasn't into school as much as what I thought I wish I would have been. I wish I would have. At one point in time, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I loved history, but my life outside of school and my friends were doing all these things, you know, drinking and smoking pot and partying, and that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to stay at home and be bored and do homework. I actually did 6th grade twice because I missed so much school one year, you know. I would have a truant officer come and wake me up and take me to school in the mornings because I didn't want to get up and go to school. Because I had been out half the night, you know, walking around town at 12 and 13 years old, you know, trying to smoke pot.
And so, did that lead you into a lifestyle that you didn't plan on?
Most definitely. Most definitely.
So you're now smoking pot, and you're, as you said earlier, you've been raising yourselves your whole life. And typically when we're raising ourselves, when a person is raising themselves, that means their outside influences are more powerful than the inside influences. You want to go further into that, and where did that take you?
Well, I was definitely a follower, not a leader. Definitely a follower. I remember being outside and it being pouring down the rain and walking and me thinking, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing with myself? Trying to get high, you know. But of course, that's not enough to stop somebody, or it wasn't enough to stop me.
Right.
I continued on down that path, and some events did happen. My another sister lost her husband, and she was 6 months pregnant, I do believe, 6 or 7 months pregnant when he passed, and I was 12, going on 13, and I felt like I needed to be there for her. So I moved in with her and helped her take care of her toddler that she had, and tried to help her the best I could. And a lot of that running around stopped. I actually lived with her. My mom signed custody over of me to her, and I was going to school, and I did okay. But my sister also let me smoke pot,
Right.
so I could do it at home, you know. And I lived with her for about 3 years. And she had to choose between her oldest son and me, and she chose him, and I respectfully, I respect her decision to this day. So here I am with nowhere to go. I felt like, so my brother took me in, and I'm 15 at this point, and what I didn't know is he was having troubles in his relationship. He had a young daughter and a girlfriend, and they broke up, and I decided to stay. My brother left, and I wasn't going to leave with him and not go have nowhere to go. Here I am, a 15-year-old child. Well, she kind of just let me do whatever I wanted to. And I met this boy, and we had sex, and I wound up pregnant at 15. I missed a lot of school, and I was truant and had to go to court over that, and I wound up being put into a girls' home because of it. I felt like nobody wanted me or loved me, or I wasn't good enough. So here I am, 6 months pregnant, 15 years old. I go to this place. I don't know anybody. I'm really scared, and I don't know what I'm going to do in life, life is starting to get really real at this point. So
And you're pregnant
Yes.
at this moment while you're in the girls' home.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I was following the timeline on this. So you're pregnant and you're in a girls' home. At some point you're going to have a baby. How was that decision as to what happened to the child? How was that made? Were you involved in it, or was it made for you, or solely your decision?
So when I was younger, I never wanted to have kids. But when I got pregnant, that all changed. And I wanted to be a better mother to my child. I wanted to do things. I wanted my child to have better than what I had. So I was able to choose on what I wanted to do with the baby, and I decided to keep the baby. Because I was in State's care, I had to sign the baby over to State's care, or they wouldn't pay for formula or diapers or clothes or any of that. So I did that unknowingly, knowing that in the future it would seal my fate with this baby. So I'm 16 years old. I'm a new mom. I'm in a girls' home with girls that are either pregnant or have children under the age of 6 months old. I'm going to school, and my baby gets caught in the bed with me 5 times. I sleep on the floor for 2 weeks to break myself of that, because you're not allowed to have your baby in the bed with you. Which, by the way, he was a healthy baby boy. Everything went great. I was scared to death. But everything went good. So when the babies become mobile, you have to move, because the place was not equivalent to hold children who were crawling around. So I went to a different home, And it went all the way bad from there. In Nicholasville, there was just, as soon as we got there, I missed the first 2 weeks of school because he was sick. And then I was just tired. There was some dirty cups and a dirty bottle and a spoon and a bowl, and they told me to wash that stuff, and I told them I wasn't doing it right then and there because, it's my way or no way. And I was very stubborn and hard-headed, and they documented all these things. And I remember I was at school one day, and they actually came and got me from school and told me to pack all of his stuff, that he was going to a foster home. And I didn't know what, I was stunned. So I packed his stuff and I told him goodbye. They wouldn't let me use the phone, so I went back to school so I could call my lawyer and the baby's grandmother to tell her what had happened. And anyways, I left that home without him.
Right.
And went to a different one. It was a very long, drawn-out process. The social workers told the foster parents that this was an adoption case, that I was never going to see the baby again, which was not the case at all. He was 9 months old at that time when they had taken him, and the next time I seen him, he was walking. And the only reason why I'd seen him was because my case manager had threatened the social worker with her job if she didn't make that possible. It was really hard for me because I felt like that's all I had in life.
So how old are you at this moment?
I'm 35.
No, not this moment. That moment.
17.
17. So you're 17, and can we assume that you were sober during this process when you had the baby, when you were going from home to home?
Yes.
They kept a pretty good rein on you.
Yes, so. I didn't smoke or anything.
And so you're 17. You get to see him again, and I know that he's not with you today. He eventually was adopted out.
Yes.
How did you bear that? I mean, what was your way to settle that with yourself? Because they gave you the choice to keep him.
Yes. And
then didn't really let you keep him. They kept him and let you were going to get to raise him. And I guess you probably didn't even know that you were being graded on the way that you were raising him. So there you were in a situation where all of a sudden, you failed, and you didn't even know there was a test.
Yes.
So how did you, I mean, emotionally that had to be hugely traumatic.
It was devastating, and I didn't know how to react except for out of anger. So I was very angry. And they put me on a lot of psych meds to keep me chill, just to be all the way honest. But I was very angry. I was angry at myself. I was angry at them. I was stuck in this situation, and I didn't know what to do. So they sent me to a different group home where I'm not with him. I see him, the next time I see him, he's walking. It lifts my spirits. So I make the decision that I'm going to complete this program. I have to be in state's custody until I'm 18. So whenever I turn 18, I'm allowed to leave. So I start to do everything right. Because I was trying to get to my goal, to get to 18. I'm going to get out here. When I get 18, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to get a place. And then I'm going to fight, and I'm going to get him back. That was my plan. Well, I did most of that plan. I got out, I actually lived with the father's mother. I got a job. I got my own apartment. I was doing all these things. I took a test. I had to take all these tests, but I took a test, and the woman was astonished that I didn't have my child. I missed 3 questions on the whole entire test. It was ridiculous. So I had to do anger management classes and parenting classes, and I had some of them left because they were weekly, and we had went to court, and they were tired of waiting, and so they basically told me, either you can sign your rights away or we're taking them away today. So I did. I signed my rights away, and it was very, a very low moment for me. I am then 19 years old, and my grandfather passes away, which was like my dad my whole life. I didn't really have much to do with my dad, but I loved my grandfather. It was a different relationship with my grandfather. And so I just did what I felt like the only thing I knew. So I started drinking a lot. And to cover up all this pain that I had endured for so long. And I liked the way it made me feel. I liked that it numbed me out. But I didn't like, I would get so drunk, I would black out and do crazy things. Which was a lot of my 20s, I don't remember.
So, when I listen to this story, so you grew up, alcohol was okay.
Yeah.
It was in the household. And then when you moved in with your sister, smoking pot was okay.
Yeah.
So, and then now you're in the children's home, you have your son, and they've removed him from you, and their answer is to medicate you. So with all of this in your adolescent brain, do you think that normalized drugs and alcohol for you, where they were a viable solution?
Oh, most certainly. Here, take this pill so you can calm down, because I don't want you screaming and angry and mad. And I would take a pill and it would mellow me out.
So then at that point, did you start self-medicating? I mean, you were obviously doing that with the alcohol, trying to drink the memory even away.
Yes.
Because it was the memory that brought the pain, not
yes.
when the event's over. So, but events never end for humans. Until we process them appropriately, it's kind of like on replay in your brain, right?
Yes.
So now you're drinking heavily. I'm assuming you're smoking pot as well, because if you started smoking pot, most people follow that path through. That's their underlying low-level medication that keeps you at as even as you can, typically.
Yes.
And then when the peaks hit, then we find something else. So how long did you follow that path, or did this progress quickly to something else? Are you working at this point? I mean, how are you supporting yourself? What's your life look like?
So I had a friend that contacted me and took me out to eat. And so we went out to eat, and she propositioned me a way to make a lot of money quickly. And all I could think about was getting a lawyer to try to get him back. So I agreed to become an escort. And I couldn't do it sober, so of course I was drinking. I couldn't do it alone. And there was a lot of money in it. But I felt so low about myself that when I woke up in the morning, like I knew what I had done the night before, so I was often drinking again or smoking. I had been introduced to cocaine at that time and had just started being introduced to pain pills. So it was just whatever I could get my hands on. And I was in this revolving, just crazy situation that lasted for 5 years.
Wow. So here you are 5 years later. And honestly, it probably was like that. At least I know from our previous discussions, it kind of was like that. It started and it lasted for 5 years, but your brain doesn't have a file that files those 5 years worth of memories. And if it does, that door to that filing cabinet is locked. And I know that was a wall for you.
Yes.
So now you're, about 25, 26?
Yeah.
So now you've met Paul somewhere in here.
Yeah. I actually met him when I was 19. One of my best friends that I grew up with, she was with his cousin, and they had tried to hook us up for a year. When I met him, he was already married. This was when I was drinking heavily, and anyways, I had a boyfriend, and he was like, I can't even tell you his name today. He was like, we're going to my friend's house, we're going to get drunk, blah, blah, blah. So we wound up at Paul's house.
Oh.
And, of course, we're drinking and stuff. And this guy, I passed out on the floor. And this guy is trying to mess with me while I'm passed out. And Paul actually just happened to be walking through and made the guy get up and leave and laid next to me the whole night to make sure nobody didn't mess with me. And then we wound up just having an attraction for each other, and him and his wife split up, and so we dated for about 3 or 4 months, and then that didn't last. We were both really bad alcoholics and very promiscuous. I was working as an escort. He didn't know it. He just thought I worked in the strip club. Because that's what I told everybody. That was my cover. I'm a dancer. Which I did.
Did you ever work as a dancer?
Yes, I did.
Just checking to whether you had a halfway lie or if it was a...
And I got kicked out of most bars. Or most strip clubs. I was not allowed to return because I would just get so belligerent drunk and just act crazy and do crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty bad to get kicked out of a strip club.
Yeah. Pretty much all of them in Lexington.
Well, that's a good thing now.
Yeah.
There's no return work there.
At this time, fast forward, I've been an escort for 5 years. So what started off as drinking, I'm now a full-blown IV drug abuser. My drug of choice was heroin. And I had been trying to meet up with him for 2 weekends. And we just had found each other on MySpace, baby? No, Facebook. Facebook had just came out. But, so I had my friend drive me to his house, and I went and stayed the night and never left. And he was my saving grace. Like God did that. That's the first time God had put somebody in my life that showed me worth, that I had worth. I felt like.
So at that point, did that end the escorting when
Yes.
you guys became a permanent
Well,
fixture, or was it?
I did it a couple times after that, but for the most part, yes.
And did he ever find out until, long time later, or did he find out soon after that? Oops.
Yeah. Yeah. He knew.
Okay, so that means you didn't have to face a negative reaction from him knowing, and all of a sudden, that thing you had found, that self-worth,
Mm-hmm.
which was really not the initial reason for drugs and alcohol. It just became another reason for drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
So your desire to, and this is, I'm going here because this is often our stories, our desire to do better puts us in a place doing things because most people who do drugs and alcohol, patience is not one of their virtues.
No.
And doing the hard work and going the long way is not ever the answer. It's always the quick, fast solution.
Mm-hmm.
And then those quick, fast solutions, just like the escorting, it was going to get you money quick to be able to solve this particular problem, but all of the side effects of it, the overflow. I got to think from listening to you that was in your thought process on why you gave up with the getting your son back. Look who I am. Such a place to spiral.
And very quickly.
Yeah, because every morning you have to look at yourself.
Yeah.
And that was one of my questions as I prepared for this, is because I know from us talking previously that this was one of the things that you didn't deal with.
No.
You just buried.
Yeah.
Can you, because I know you've since dealt with it, and thus the picture we started talking about compared to the picture at the end of the intro, you sitting here now, that happened in between the first picture and the second picture is when you faced this and didn't just face it as an acknowledgement, but dealt with all of the decision-making processes through that. You want to talk about that because that had to be part of the way on your path to freedom. You had to find a place for God to free you from the bondage that you held. I mean, you held the keys to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were the one that put yourself in that place. Not that, well, you put yourself in the place initially, but that's an easy justification to get past. Why? This is why I did it. You could hear it in your story. But when you wake up that next morning, and the next morning, and the next morning, now there's a place that you're imprisoning yourself.
Yes.
You put a judgment upon yourself of who you are. I have no value, thus I'm not going to go after my son. So can we explore for a minute, how did you work that through with God? Wasn't it admittance? Okay, God, I did this. What was your process, if you can, in dealing with that with him?
Well, first I had to surrender some things to him that I had never surrendered before. He has shown me through my other child that I have. I feel like my drug addiction has come full circle. And I hate to say it, but I'm the type of person that learns the hard way.
Right.
You can't just tell me, no, that's going to burn you. Don't touch that, because that's the first thing I'm going to do is touch it and burn myself. Over and over and over and over and over again. But I had to really let God in and really get real with God. and get real with myself.
Right. So that's kind of the real part. To not overuse the word real, but that's the focal point. Is you can't get real with God until you're real with you.
Yeah.
And acknowledging, and it's such a difficult task to acknowledge who we've been, what we willingly, knowingly did, and at the same time to let ourselves free and say, okay, God, I can't do this anymore. I can't hold this against me anymore. I need you. How hard was that for you? Because I know that that's one of the most difficult steps I've ever witnessed.
It's very hard, and I see myself sometimes taking things back, and I have to give them back. But I have to remember that I'm not that person anymore. I'm a completely different person.
You're a new creation.
Exactly, in Christ.
Yes.
And when that was like mind blowing for me. I'm a child of God today. The past doesn't define me, who I am today. The past is is what's made me who I am today, but it doesn't define who I am today.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we go through the past on this show to give us a basis point for freedom.
Yes.
Because everything that you from childhood, early childhood, you were in bondage. From the first molestation up through being in bondage to your circumstances in the projects, to a mother that couldn't be a mother. And I know that that's one of the things that you had to overcome as well, is I think the enemy tried to tell you, and correct me, but that you couldn't be a mother either.
Yeah.
And so to give everybody a bigger picture that may be watching this, 4 years ago, right? 3.5 years ago, on a Monday night, I was having a 12-step class. And here comes Gina and another woman, and her daughter Leah was at my house already. I didn't know this at that moment, but Gina wanted to be free. And there was a lot of demonic oppression on you that night. And we prayed and prayed, and it wasn't the time. Freedom didn't come that night. Leah was going to stay with us for a minute. And Leah stayed with us for 3 years, nearly.
Yeah.
She doesn't live with us now. I am Pop, by the way, and my wife is Nan. Paul and Gina, we consider our children. It's a very complicated story. For it to really make sense, you have to look at it in this made-up version that we have, that Gina is Angie's daughter from another relationship, because they're exactly alike. And Paul is my son from another relationship, because we're exactly alike. The irony of that is beyond this episode. But we're all together now.
Yes.
And in the midst of that comes an even, for me, a more difficult part of your story. There's another child. His name is Jaden. He's awesome. Jaden came here because the woman that he was living with had got injured and was unable to care for him, and we got a phone call that if we didn't take him, he was going to go to foster care. And my wife and I didn't think we could take him because he and our 12-year-old, who was at the time 9, were like oil and water. They couldn't be in the same room for 5 minutes without fighting. So we were sure that was an impossibility and didn't know how we were going to tell them that we couldn't do it. A lot of burden there. And so we were on the way to see my brother and for Christmas. And we got in the van and we're on our way there and we tell Matthew about the situation, our son. And Matthew says, can't let him go to foster care. Can't go let him live with strangers. So Jaden came to live with us. And at that time, Jaden was really rebellious. Paul and Gina had gone back into addiction. Jaden ran the house, or his life at least. You were a lot in denial at that point. Kind of had checked out.
Oh, most definitely.
So that brings you up to the place where we're now a year and a half into this, and which means we're going on 2 years into Leah being with us. And the social services came to us and said, we're at the place of permanent placement. These children, parents have had enough opportunities. Gina's background was part of it. The guardian ad litem for the children happened to be Gina's guardian ad litem when she was a child. So she really struggled with it because she wanted so much for Gina to succeed and be able to have a chance to overcome all that she had witnessed in your life.
Yeah.
So, such a tough place to be in. And my wife and I were exhausted. And we did not believe we could permanently take Gina, or Leah and Jaden. And so I began to ask God about it. And the social worker, who was young and green and no experience, and we were in the midst of COVID at the time, and she made it my job to tell them that the state's giving permanent custody of your children to somebody. So we were praying about what could we do. There we were. We couldn't go any further, and I won't get into the details, but it was very arduous here. Really, really hard here. So, long story short, my wife, through a friend at the church, we were introduced with a couple that had been trying for 11 years to have a child, and they were willing to take Jaden. And so I prayed about this, and I hadn't told you yet that the permanent custody thing was happening.
No, because me and Paul were in rehab at this time.
That's right. Paul and Gina were both in rehab, and it's a lengthier part of the story, but there was a place where they just disappeared off the planet, because that's what you do when you go off the reservation, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
All of those feelings that we were just talking about, all of that guilt and shame and unworthiness, is only emphasized. Would you agree? When
Very
you're a
much
parent
so.
now.
Very much so.
And Leah's 11 months old. Jaden was 6 at the time when we got them both. So all of those emotions caused them to completely check out, be incognito, unavailable, not showing up. Then they go to rehab, and there's just nothing. I mean, there's no contact. Gina would call.
Mm-hmm.
Paul wouldn't talk to me. And when he did talk to me, he got mad and hung up on me. Now I've got to tell them. And I've got this plan that I've prayed about. And I'm convinced in my heart at the time that this was from God. This was the right plan. And I had to tell them. And we've never had this discussion, and this is probably not where you were prepared to have it, but I remember that day that I talked to you. And before we get there, first of all, I talked to our lawyer who had been with us on the other children we had raised, and our son came from addiction. As I said in the last episode, I brought him in and said, here's my plan. And he goes, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. The courts don't like surprises. They like to have time to think about things, and it's not going to happen. I said, why? My lawyer's a believer. I said, I think this is from God. I think if you talk to the guardian ad litem, I think she'll like the idea. I think she'll go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's only because it was from God. And then you call, and I tell you, I got to talk to you. I remember crying that day. I've done some hard things, but that is the hardest. Those two conversations, yours and Paul's, the hardest conversations I've ever had to have. What were your thoughts toward us? Because, you trusted us, and now we're going to give one of your kids away.
I was very angry at first. Very angry. And couldn't or wouldn't allow myself to see why. Because all I could think about it at this point was me, and I was being selfish. Here we go again, But I didn't use that to fuel the fire, as in going out and getting high and numbing it all. I used it to fuel a fire to make myself better today.
And that's the reason I brought this up, because Paul didn't speak to me for quite some time. And when he and I sit down together, we'll have this same discussion. For his benefit, he gets to see this one first and prepare himself. I sprung this on Gina. Sent her a list of questions, but that wasn't one of them. And the reason I wanted to is because my admiration of the both of them. Because you were at the place of going through stages of your recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were on the upswing.
Yeah.
And you didn't use this.
Mm-mm.
And so everything in this just reinforced, because now, just to fast forward to now, Paul just happened to have recently told Jaden's adoptive father, I didn't lose a son, I gained a family. Leah is at their house right now while we're doing this.
Yes.
It has turned out to be the perfect situation.
Very much so.
Which tells us it was God.
Yes.
And it was God that gave you the strength and
Mm-hmm.
Paul the strength to go through this, because Jaden was certainly your replacement child.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings me to a question I thought about as I was listening to your story earlier. So they took your baby, wouldn't let him sleep with you. And I know that that's one of the things that you still do with Leah. And you did do with Jaden.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered that when Paul complains to you that I like to sleep in my own bed alone sometimes with my wife? Have you ever thought that maybe there's a hurt?
Yeah, there definitely is. My first son is 18 years old.
Yeah.
And it's a little scary because if I will, I just want to be, I'm waiting on God's timing today. I'm not trying to do something prematurely, but there will come a time where I will meet him again.
And have you, obviously you have.
Yeah.
When you think about that moment, do you feel the need to make excuses, tell a story, or do you think? Because I've had that moment with my daughter.
Yeah.
Lost her for 15 years. And all the time up to that, I kept running through my head how I could explain.
Why?
Right. And here we are 3 years later now. And I've never once had to have the explanation.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you were having those same...
Oh, most definitely. Why those kids and not me? Did you not love me? Those things.
Right.
Those are two of the main things that run through my mind about the things that he will ask. Was I not good enough? But I also feel like that's the enemy, because that's the way I felt when I was,
Exactly.
And the enemy wants to use that today against me.
So, while we're here, we're probably getting close. I didn't set a timer on this one, which I kind of did that on purpose. Let's focus for a second on freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Because
yes,
you are definitely free.
Yes.
I can testify to that. You're not just sober. You're making life decisions that aren't based on staying sober. What was the difference? Because you'd been sober before.
Mm-hmm.
And life looked good through your windows.
Yeah.
What's the difference between being sober and being free?
Okay. So, I believe that being free is a choice that I've made to be able to live my life with God's help, of course.
Right.
And I believe just being sober, it's just a matter of time before you get high again. And I don't ever want to get high again. I don't have the need or the want to.
There we go. That's what I want. Because you said I don't ever want to get high again. And I can tell you from teaching for 15 years in addiction and all the years of my own, many times I said I don't ever want to get high again. But that's not what you meant. You meant I don't have a want to ever get high again.
The need or the want to. I don't. I just went through a little procedure, a little surgery, and I haven't. How can I put this? I just went through this procedure, and my first thought wasn't, for me to go and get something, to ask the doctor so that I can get something to make me feel better.
Right.
I'm hollering out, Jesus, Lord, God, please help me, help me, Lord, help me. And taking, some ibuprofen, and, this life that you live is always going to have pain. You're going to have pain, and you're going to have sorrow, and you're going to have hurt. But you don't have to use that. You can use that to fuel your fire to get your heart's desires, instead of use that to get high and give up, And I'm not about giving up today.
Well, that's well said. Everybody thinks that when you get saved, all your troubles go away. Excuse me.
I wish it. I wish it to be true.
But it's not.
It's not, no.
But what you said was, I think, well worth repeating. Those troubles are the things that make you stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start recognizing that there's no trouble that comes upon us that didn't go through the filter of God first.
Mm-hmm.
And he deemed it good for you to go through this trouble.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us full circle. So your life started with troubles.
Mm-hmm.
And many were thrust upon you. Many were brought upon by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you're still in a life with troubles.
Yeah.
But there's peace on this end, and there was never peace on the other end.
No. And that come from solely from God.
Excuse me.
I've had very many encounters with God, and one of the biggest ones that really showed me some things about not just myself and my life, but my children's lives was when I got this revelation of this woman and this man taking Jaden and raising them. I did not fight this. Now, I could have fought this. I could have. But I did not fight it because it wasn't what I felt in my heart. It wasn't God's plan. It was God's plan for Jaden to have two families. It was God's plan for us to be intertwined. And I was very much so happy about that. So I didn't fight this at all. And I'm not going to fight this. We're still in some little court things that we have to do, but I'm very much happy with where Jaden is. He's happy and healthy. I couldn't ask for better people to have had him, and they were a godsend, and they know that.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it was a God story.
Yes.
And I think that's part of, for everybody out there, I could have a podcast on addiction that leaves you still without remedy. But this is finding freedom from addiction, because I know that in God there is true freedom.
Yes.
Because the Bible tells us whom the Son sets free is free indeed. And that's why we're here. That's why Gina agreed to come bare herself, so to speak.
Yeah.
In front of the world and say, okay, world, look at me. These are things thrust upon me. These are choices I made. This is where God got involved, and this is where I am now. And we're not promising you, again, there's a life with no troubles. But what we are promising you is there's a life free from the bondage of those troubles.
Mm-hmm.
They don't own you anymore. And so I thank you for coming on board. I thank you for giving us the most important thing that you have, your time. I thank you just for being in our life. We look so forward every time you guys come in. This was not my weekend with Leah. It's Nan's weekend. So I feel a little jilted.
It was Nan's weekend last time too.
Yeah, it was, yeah. So, but earlier this week, there's a fellow named Carter that you'll get to know. That it was my day the other day. So I guess that's part of being a Nan and a pop-pop. And I'm thankful to God that through freedom from addiction, my wife and I, who could have no children together, now counted our quiver full. And a wonderful woman of God prophesied that over me once, that my quiver would be full. And biblically, a quiver holds 12 arrows. And when you count up all the children and now grandchildren that God has given us through addiction, my quiver is full. And so I want to thank you again. Welcome again. Tell everybody. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. This is my second video on YouTube. I have no idea what it does. But I hear from watching YouTube that it helps. Follow us on Facebook. Encounter Hope podcast. Look for more great things to come. Look for more great stories and teaching coming up and some roundtable discussions. And please comment. I'll return every one of them, I promise. And may God bless you.